News headquarters in Washington, I'm Howard K. Smith.
I'm Frank Reynolds in New York. These are tonight's headlines. Apollo 12's mechanical problems have been solved, and the moon launch is go for tomorrow on schedule. President Nixon makes an extraordinary visit to the Congress and thanks members of both parties who support him on the war. Demonstrators who oppose Mr. Nixon on the war begin what they call a march against death in Washington. And Vice President Agnew makes a speech about the men responsible for network television news. Howard?
Reports tonight from Tom Jarrell on the President's surprise visit to the Capitol, Bob Clark on the presidential address to the Senate, Sam Donaldson on the anti-war protests now underway, Frank Mariano on a Marine division whose fighting days in Vietnam are over, Gregory Jackson on 5 arrests in connection with those New York bombings, and Howard Tuckner on a morale booster for police in Indianapolis. Frank?
Today, Apollo 12 astronaut Alan Bean said, "We're ready to go when they are." And they, the men behind man's second flight to the moon, are ready too. Yesterday, a hitch developed that could have delayed the moon shot for a month. A leaky hydrogen tank was discovered. Working around the clock, technicians replaced it. The space agency says the launch will go off on schedule at 11:22 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. Here with a report on the men and the mission is ABC science editor Jules Bergman.
Apollo 12 begins here at Pad 39 as the epic journey of Apollo 11 did. And if there's one thing that's clear, it's this. Apollo 11 is a tough act to follow. But no astronauts were ever better picked for a mission than Pete Conrad, Dick Gordon, and Alan Bean. All Navy commanders and all old friends. And their 10-day flight is a brutal test of human endurance, including 7 hours or more of exploring the moon on foot. Spacecraft Commander Conrad, 39, veteran of Gemini 5 and 11, is funny, friendly, outspoken, and hard as nails when he has to be. So are Gordon and Bean. Unlike Apollo 11, where it was enough just to land on the moon, Conrad and Bean have to make a pinpoint landing, trying to eliminate the 4-mile error Armstrong and Aldrin experienced. If man is to really explore, he has to be able to land exactly where he wants to. Conrad, who's had more practice at landings than any other man, is aiming to set down Intrepid, his lunar module, as close as he can to the Surveyor 3 spacecraft that landed 2.5 years ago. He and Al Bean then plan to moonwalk over to Surveyor during their second EVA and remove and bring back its TV camera and other parts. They first planned to land 1,100 feet away, now hope to touch down almost on the rim of its crater. They have to land within 3,000 feet, or they won't have enough oxygen to safely get to Surveyor and make it back to Intrepid. The major goal of the mission is to deploy 5 scientific experiments that will radio back data on moonquakes, solar winds, and the moon's atmosphere for more than a year. Conrad and Bean will also gather rock and soil samples and painstakingly photograph each step. Each sample to tell us more to see if this part of the moon differs from the Sea of Tranquility where the Eagle landed. They'll spend 32 hours on the moon, and after they take off to rejoin Dick Gordon and the Clipper, the empty Intrepid will then be sent smashing into the moon so as not to leave debris that might endanger future flights. Then, one more day in lunar orbit, filming future landing sites before heading home for a landing in the South Pacific. This is Jules Bergman, ABC News at Cape Kennedy.
ABC will carry the launch of Apollo 12 live beginning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. We'll be back with more news in a moment.
Be right down!
Excuse me, Mr. McCormick. Did you get your dentures Polident clean this morning?
Look, Polident may be the best way to clean my dentures. But the way I'm rushed most mornings, I just have to settle for less.
Now there's a fast-working Polident tablet. New Polident Green.
Polident Green? Why green?
Green shows speed. Speed you'll see as powerful green cleaning bubbles work safely to wipe out tough denture stain, embarrassing denture odor. Fast.
Fast-working denture tablet? How fast?
In just minutes, the green is gone. That means stain and odor are gone. Thorough cleaning right before your eyes. No other tablet cleans better or faster than new Polident Green.
Hey, the best way to clean dentures is the fast way, too.
New Polident Green.
Like the fighting in Vietnam, the argument about it here in Washington escalated appreciably today. A few moments ago, the big protest march, to continue unbroken on Washington streets until Saturday, began, but the president himself had already carried out a kind of a preemptive strike by making an unusual visit to Capitol Hill to ask Congress to support his Vietnam policy. First now, a report on the president before Congress, ABC White House correspondent Tom Jarrow reporting.
The mission to Capitol Hill was considered extraordinary, perhaps unprecedented. President Nixon took his case for national unity before Congress during days of war dissent over an undeclared war. The invitation was arranged after a majority of members both here in the House and in the Senate expressed in signed documents support for the president. In part, here's what he told the House.
I cannot tell you the time, the date, but I do know this, that when that peace comes, that it will come because of the support that we have received, not just from Republicans, but from Democrats, from Americans in this House and in the other body and throughout this nation. History will record that the United States of America, in a period of crisis, in a period of controversy, met the challenge of greatness, and that the representatives of the people thought of themselves as Americans, put their country first rather than their party first in the great tradition of this House. I do know that when the security of America is involved, when peace for America and for the world is involved, when the lives of our young men are involved, we are not Democrats, we are not Republicans, we are Americans.
After the House speech, the president had lunch with Senate leaders. Noted members of the friendly opposition, such as Senators Mansfield and Kennedy, were attentive and courteous. This unity among Republican senators over the Haynsworth nomination seemed to vanish briefly as a courtesy to the presidential visit. After lunch, the president was escorted into the Senate chamber. Details on his remarks there from ABC's Bob Clark.
In the Senate, where cameras were not permitted, the president defied both tradition and his critics by implying in a rather remarkable impromptu speech that some senators talk too much. He mentioned the upcoming arms limitation talks with the Russians, said it's vitally important that such negotiations not be compromised by public discussion in Congress. This appeared to be a direct slap at Democratic Senator Muskie and others who've been advancing their own proposals for ending the arms race. The president said he's trying to set up a system where he can get the Senate's advice in such matters without weakening this country's negotiating position. He made his appearance just before the Senate began its formal debate on the Haynsworth case. The president referred obliquely to this, saying he respects the right of senators to make up their own minds. One more Republican, Pearson of Kansas, announced later that he'll vote for Haynsworth, but a Democrat, Symington of Missouri, joined the still growing opposition. Leaving the Capitol, the president had a brief encounter with anti-war demonstrators before he was whisked back to the White House. Bob Clark, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
The president's speeches today emphasized the fact that Washington is far more nervous about the November protest than it was about the one in October. 35,000 troops now ring this city. Many federal buildings were locked up at noon, and sentries are posted at the Justice Department. The first protest event of the day was a kind of a mass for peace conducted by Catholic and Episcopal clergy in the halls of the Pentagon. Police arrested 150 people, including 2 bishops. The focal event of the protest is the so-called March Against Death, a slow procession from Arlington Cemetery past the White House to the Capitol. ABC's Sam Donaldson reports now from Arlington.
The staging area for the march is here on the Virginia side of the Potomac River. The participants are being brought by bus to these tents, where they receive a placard bearing the name of a dead American serviceman, or in some instances a village bombed in Vietnam, and a candle. They're walking from the tents to the end of Memorial Bridge, where the march is beginning with a brief prayer service conducted by Stuart Meacham, a Quaker, and a co-chairman of the new mobilization committee. The march is going to be led by 6 muffled drummers, and the first marcher is Mrs. Judy Droves of Columbia, Missouri, whose husband David was killed in Vietnam. He was a Navy lieutenant in April of this year. Across the bridge, single file, they will go around the Lincoln Memorial to the White House and then the Capitol. It's a 4.5-mile route. They will use the sidewalks all the way and obey the traffic regulations. When it's over on Saturday morning, the new Mobilization Committee hopes that 46,000 persons will have participated in what they call the March Against Death. Sam Donaldson, ABC News, at Memorial Bridge.
Extremely tight security measures went into effect this evening around the White House, and on Saturday morning the area will be entirely sealed off, and for the first time in history, the ellipse, the park south of the White House, will be completely closed to the public. Opposition to this march has come from many sources. Among them, the Gold Star mothers whose sons have died in uniform. One of those mothers, Mrs. Betty Ann Funk, came to Washington today from Philadelphia to express her very personal complaint. Her son died in Vietnam, so his name is being carried in that procession from Arlington, and she deeply resents it.
We do not deny them the right to march, the right to dissent, or the right to voice their opinions or their objections. The only thing we are objecting to is the use of our sons' names, who are not and would not be in accord with this moratorium march. To us, it is a blasphemy to use the names of boys who were willing to give their lives that we might enjoy our freedom. As I have expressed it before, all America should bow in gratitude before these young men who willingly gave of their tomorrows that we might enjoy our todays.
We'll be back with more news in a moment.
It's a nice, simple idea. I guess I can believe it.
I think it's funny no one thought of it before.
We asked Mrs. Kelly and her daughter Regina about new unscented Arid Extra Dry, the only unscented antiperspirant spray you can buy.
It's a funny feeling at first. I mean, using an unscented antiperspirant. I pressed it. No smell.
You know, I liked it right away.
It has aluminum chlorhydrate, just like your regular. I've been using it every day now. Helps keep me just as dry.
I don't wear a lot of makeup. I like things natural. It just made sense to me.
Besides, very fashionable. Not putting one fragrance upon the other.
Everything's got a gimmick today. But an unscented antiperspirant, that's a nice idea.
I think it's a very democratic idea. At least you're giving everybody a choice.
Use Arid Extra Dry every day. To be sure, new unscented, regular. Helps stop wetness.
In a speech to Midwest Republicans in Des Moines tonight, Vice President Agnew discusses television news broadcasts and network commentators. He is strongly critical not only of the nightly news programs, but also of television's treatment of other events. The Vice President refers to President Nixon's speech on Vietnam and says this, quote, "The audience of 70 million Americans gathered to hear the President of the United States was inherited by a small band of network commentators and self-appointed analysts, the majority of whom expressed in one way or another their hostility to what he had to say." Mr. Agnew says, quote, "To guarantee in advance that the President's plea for national unity would be challenged, one network trotted out Averell Harriman for the occasion," end quote. Governor Harriman appeared on ABC that night. Again, I quote the Vice President, "Where the President had issued a call for unity, Mr. Harriman was encouraging the country not to listen to him," end quote. The Vice President praises the networks for, quote, "important contributions to the national knowledge," end quote. But he goes on to say, quote, "It was also the networks that elevated Stokely Carmichael and George Lincoln Rockwell from obscurity to national prominence." Mr. Agnew says, quote, "A raised eyebrow, an inflection of the voice, a caustic remark dropped in the middle of a broadcast can raise doubts in a million minds about the veracity of a public official or the wisdom of a government policy," end quote. Mr. Agnew challenges the objectivity of network commentators and refers to a concentration of power, quote, "in the hands of a tiny and closed fraternity of privileged men elected by no one and enjoying a monopoly sanctioned and licensed by the government," end quote. The Vice President says he is not asking for government censorship. He says, quote, I am asking whether a form of censorship already exists when the news that 40 million Americans receive each night is determined by a handful of men responsible only to their corporate employers and filtered through a handful of commentators who admit to their own set of biases, end quote. The Vice President says that television searches for excitement and controversy, and he asks in this search, quote, has more than equal time gone to that minority of Americans who specialize in attacking the United States, its institutions, and its citizens, end quote. Mr. Agnew has not yet delivered his speech, so we are unable to bring you a filmed account of it. I have written this report from an advance copy of his text made available to us by his Washington office this afternoon. The Vice President's address will be presented over many of these ABC stations at 7 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. We'll have more news in a moment.
You get more going for you with Kellogg's Corn Flakes. More good corn taste, morning freshness, wake up crispness.
For the marvelous cornness of corn.
Remember Tom Harmon, the kid who had trouble keeping his shirt on? Well, now my grandchildren are pushing me around. You know, at my age, you have to live smarter if you want to stay on the young side. Sensible exercise and sensible eating, starting with a good breakfast like Kellogg's Product 19. The only cereal with 100% of the minimum daily adult requirements for vitamins and iron. Delicious, too. Want to get back on the young side? Start with Kellogg's Product 19.
Lucky you. It's your birthday. But Mr. Chocolate Mess can ruin everything. Invite the good guys. M&M's chocolate candies. Never a chocolate mess. Because the candy shell on the outside seals the delicious chocolate inside. The milk chocolate melts in your mouth, not in your hand. M&M's plain and peanut chocolate candies. The good guys.
Peanuts here! Peanuts!
Give me a bag!
Here you go!
Hey, it's a Snickers bar!
Sure, with Snickers you get a bag of peanuts in every bar.
Wow!
Inside that milk chocolate there's a bag of peanuts. Big, fresh roasted southern peanuts in the caramel and peanut butter nougat. So if you love peanuts, get Snickers. There's a bag of peanuts in every bar. Snickers.
The Paris peace talks remain stalemated, with Hanoi refusing to deal directly with the Saigon government, even refusing to accept an offer of a prisoner release from Saigon. United States Ambassador Lodge was again rebuffed today by the North Vietnamese when he reiterated President Nixon's position and demonstrated congressional backing for that position. Hanoi's spokesman hailed the anti-war protests in the United States. On the fighting fronts in Vietnam, fewer than 100 men were killed, 97 to be exact last week. But early today, the North Vietnamese launched their biggest attack in a year near the demilitarized zone. About 500 enemy troops moved against an American armored company just 3.5 miles from the DMZ, and 17 Americans were reported killed in that action. While some of our troops face what may turn out to be another major battle, others prepare to go home, survivors of past battles. ABC's Frank Mariano files this report from Da Nang.
It's all over for the 3rd Marine Division. After 5 years of bitter fighting in Vietnam, they're going home. In this ceremony in Da Nang, the last units of the division are going to Okinawa. They leave behind memories of some of the war's bitterest battles. Before they go home, the Marines are reminded of some of the more famous. For a glimpse into the past, we took a helicopter flight along the DMZ for a first-hand look at where some of those battles were fought. Cam Lo Bridge, the 3rd Division battled for positions here in early 1968 to defend the tiny village against hundreds of North Vietnamese. Cam Lo is said to be fairly secure now. Con Tien, just below the southern edge of the demilitarized zone. Here, elements of the 3rd suffered through 12 days of murderous pounding by enemy artillery. The Marines survived wave after human wave of enemy attackers. Casualties were heavy on both sides. Today, Con Tien is manned by South Vietnamese forces. This is the rock pile, a crude outcropping of rock overlooking the DMZ. The fight for its lopsided peak is continuous. After several years of 3rd Marine occupation, the rock pile is in U.S. Army hands. This road leads to Khe Sanh, perhaps the most memorable of all Vietnam battles. For 77 days, Marines took the heaviest volume of enemy artillery shells in the war's history. Our helicopter pilot said we couldn't fly all the way to Khe Sanh without armed escort. When the Marines recently pulled out, they left it unguarded. Now it belongs to the enemy. At least for the time, the area west to Laos from this point on the road is devoid of Allied ground troops. It makes up 40% of I Corps. The Corps area, bordered by Laos on the west and the demilitarized zone on the north, was sparsely manned to begin with. The departure of the 3rd Marine Division leaves this vital area more vulnerable to enemy occupation since the Marines came nearly 5 years ago. Frank Mariano, ABC News, Da Nang.
We'll have more news in a moment.
If you believe in palm reading, you know your lifeline doesn't show you how long you'll live, but rather your awareness of things around you. Lines arising from the lifeline are effort lines. The best way to avoid the appearance of ugly effort lines and increase the awareness of your lifeline can also be found in the palm of your hand with the yellow pages. For more awareness with less effort, let your fingers do the walking.
What are you doing 11:15 Saturday morning? What about 3:30 Saturday afternoon? The weekend. Special places to go, special things to do. Visiting by long distance is one of them, and phone rates are low all weekend long. Why not call early this weekend, before the Sunday evening rush hours?
In New York, 5 people were charged with conspiracy today in connection with a series of bombings in several Manhattan buildings. Details now from ABC's Gregory Jackson.
Men carrying a duffel bag came to this armory last night. It was dark and quiet when they threw the bag into the last Army truck and started to walk away. But that was as far as they got, without sudden police escort, and later charges of conspiracy in 8 bombings in New York City. 2 other persons were later arrested, and a third is being hunted. FBI and city detectives said they trailed the 2 men on a subway from a dingy apartment in the city's Lower East Side. After their arrest, police returned to the apartment and arrested 2 other suspects, one of them a young lady. At their federal arraignment today, bail for each one was set at $500,000. None could raise it. The 2 arrested at the scene were 34-year-old Samuel Melville, who said he had a prior record and was carrying a revolver at the time of his arrest, and 39-year-old George Dimmerly, who said he was an unemployed die maker. In the apartment, the FBI had arrested 22-year-old Jane Alpert, a recent Swarthmore College graduate who wrote for one of the city's underground newspapers, and John Huey III, a 22-year-old from Sumter, South Carolina, who also wrote for the underground press in New York. A second woman, Pat Swinton, was also charged, and the FBI is looking for her. This is Gregory Jackson, ABC News, New York.
Indianapolis, like every other major city in the nation, has a growing crime problem. Officials there have taken an unusual step in an effort to meet it. ABC's Howard Tuckner reports.
The patrolmen in these cars have just completed their 8-hour shift. But instead of driving them to a police garage, the policeman drives them home. It's his second car, but really his first, because with the city paying for the gas and insurance, he uses it instead of his civilian car, like Patrolman Pat Weber, to take the kids to school or the wife to the supermarket. But there's one must. Whenever he's using the police car, he must tune in the police radio and help out if needed.
Attention all cars, recovered car, weight 62 Ford 4-door, 49 Peepaw 4736.
So with 3 times more police cars on the street here than before, 455 in all, off-duty policemen in their take-home police cars have made more than 75 felony arrests in the last 2 months. And for the first time in the recent history of this city, the crime rate has gone down. The innovation not only has created a long police officer waiting list for men who want 2 cars, but has created more harmony in police families.
It's a great advantage to us housewives. This way we have
the two cars in the family now. First, it was a bit not embarrassing, but everyone would stop and look at you when you stopped at a stop sign, or you got out of the car. They kind of gave you the once-over, but once you get used to it, I feel like it's just a car now.
But like every far-reaching brainchild, family police cars, alas, also have at least one drawback. Police wives say their husbands are so proud of their Bimini blue and white prowl cars, they're simply spending too many off-duty hours waxing them. Howard Tuckner, ABC News, Indianapolis.
We'll be back with more news in a moment.
What do you smoke?
Well, cigarettes sometimes, but cigars mostly.
Cigars mostly. What kind of cigars do you smoke?
Tiparillos.
You smoke Tiparillos? How do you like them?
Well, it's the taste. I like the taste very much.
You do?
Well, the best thing is that when I used to smoke cigarettes,
yes?
I inhaled, and you don't have to with a cigar.
Tiparillo. Pleasure without inhaling. Choose regular or menthol.
Irregularity. Were you born that way, or is your system different? Some people think normal means daily regularity, but doctors say normal is what's normal for you. That's why X-Lax doesn't try to prevent irregularity. It just helps you toward your normal regularity, the way your system is. However, age has changed it. Try chocolated X-Lax, or now unflavored pills.
Now with tonight's commentary, here is Howard K. Smith.
If you think there's a new Nixon, the president's daughter once said to reporters, you just didn't understand the old Nixon. That becomes easier to believe, watching now a Nixon so new that he resembles the old one. For 10 months now, the president has spoken in a low voice and put little pressure on Congress or anybody else. Now, with issue number 1, Vietnam, risen to a crunch, he proves he has not forgotten how to fight. The steel beneath the velvet is showing. As Lyndon Johnson signally failed to do, Mr. Nixon is systematically mobilizing support. He began with his November the 3rd speech to the nation. He continued with that resolution in the House supporting his policy. Today, he followed up with a personal visit to Congress to muster votes, which it appears will add up to a sizable majority in the House. Mr. Agnew's crescendo of combative speeches, reaching the kind of a climax tonight with an attack on how this medium is used, adds the steam of feeling to it. Whether one supports or opposes the president, we are clearly watching a case of a chief executive using his office to win his way that textbooks of the future will refer back to as an example. We may also be watching the end of the long period when the Vietnam debate was a one-way affair. Frank?
Thank you, Howard. That's tonight's news and comment. I'm Frank Reynolds.